A warm welcome to today's video explaining Kantian Deontology for Philosophy A-Level. Now, there are really only 5 bullet points, 5 key things that we need to understand the entirety of the unit. The first one is understanding what is meant by the goodwill. Now, the goodwill is the will to do the right thing, the will to fulfill your duty, to do what you ought to do. It's the will to do what you ought to do. And the goodwill is the only inherent good. Beauty, intelligence, competence, these are all things that can be used for good and for bad, for immoral acts. But the goodwill, the will to do the right thing, can only be used to do the right thing, because it's that by definition. Now, what does using the goodwill look like? Well, there are 3 examples here, and we can demonstrate this point. Now, deontology is all about doing the right thing for the right reasons. And that's to have a goodwill. A goodwill is to be motivated by duty, acting out of duty, not in accordance with it. Now, in the first image, you'll see a loving father. Now, this father loves his son, and that's the reason why he cares for his son. He educates his son, he reads with his son, he plays sports with his son, he cares for his son. You get the idea. He's a good father. And the father does this because he loves his son. So he's doing the right thing. He is seemingly acting in accordance with duty. That's what Kant would say. He's acting in accordance with duty. He is doing the right thing. He's caring for his son, and that's what he should do. But he's doing it because he wants to. And that's why it's only in accordance with duty. It is the right thing, but it isn't for the right reasons. And image 2 shows why. Now, if you just act on desire alone, you just care for your son, ultimately because you want to, because you care for your son, but because you love, this father loves his son. If one day the father decided not to love his son, then the father would abandon the son. The father wouldn't care for his son, because the only thing that was making him do the right thing was this love too. Love is good. It's maybe virtuous if you're using the language of Aristotle. But ultimately, if that ceases, if that condition changes, then the father would no longer care for the son. And so acting in accordance with duty is not enough, because if the father doesn't want to, then the father might leave. The moral thing to do is to act out of duty, to care for the son. The father should care for the son because he ought to, not because he wants to, not because he gets pleasure from doing that, not because it's the virtuous thing to do and it's going to create a flourishing character. He should do it because he ought to. And that's doing the right thing, caring for the son, for the right reasons. And that's deontology in a nutshell. That's what Kant's theory is all about. Now, Kant distinguishes between the hypothetical imperative and the categorical imperative. The hypothetical imperative are if-then statements. Now, these are conditional. If you want to win a football match, then you need to score goals and not concede goals. Now, these are based on desire, which is okay for Kant. They are normal statements, they're helpful statements, but importantly, they are not for the domain of morality, for the domain of ethics. That's what's important here. They are based on our wants, they are based on our desires, and not on our good will. And so we don't need to worry about if-then conditional statements. How do we create rules? Because that's what deontology is all about. It's a rule-based framework of ethics. And so Kant formulates the categorical imperatives, and we can define it as such. Act only on the maxim that you can will should become universal law. Now, I have paraphrased that statement from Kant to help me understand it, and hopefully to help you understand it as well. If you need to break that down further and put that in language that you understand, that's great. Now, what does this mean? Act only on the maxim that you can will should become universal law. By maxim here, what I mean is, what you should understand this to mean, just in this context, this isn't what maxim means in general. Google can tell you that, but I'm using it in a way of meaning a draft law. So a law for everyone to follow, but like a draft version. And you get the maxim from one of your actions. So maybe you're thinking about lying for whatever reason. What you need to do is you need to make that a draft law. And then you need to will it. And then you need to reason. Kant's theory is all about reasoning. It's all about logic. It's not about pleasure. It's not about consequences. It's about what ideas are coherent. What can we will? So we have this draft law about lying. Lie when it suits you. Or lie to people. You know, you don't want it to be an if-then statement. Just, you ought to lie. Whenever you like. Let's say. So you ought to lie. You're taking that as a draft law, not just for you, it's a universal law. It's for everyone. And now we need to run this through a number of formulations to see whether this can actually become a universal law. Of course, this isn't a law for everyone. You're not going to tell anyone on the street that they need to follow this and that they should follow this to be moral. But this is a rule for you. And it's based on whether everyone else could follow it. We have two different types of contradiction, and this is contained within the first formulation. So the first formulation of the categorical imperative is this idea of universalization. The first one is quite simple to understand. So we can have a contradiction in conception. So this could be something like lying or stealing or promises or paying back money like credit from a bank. And the reason why these things create a self-contradiction. So the reason they create a self-contradiction is, suppose lying. If I was to lie whenever I wanted, and I was to will that everyone lied whenever they wanted, what would happen? Well, the concept of lying would cease to exist. Because if everyone knew everyone was lying all the time, there would be no concept of honesty. And there would be no concept of lying either. Because if you don't have honesty, well, then you can't lie. There is no truth. The same thing applies with stealing and private property. If everyone just stole all the time, then the concept of ownership would fall apart. And if people don't own anything, then there's nothing to steal. So the concepts collapse of themselves. That's a contradiction in conception. These are quite easy ones. And what these create are perfect duties. Duties that you need to follow all of the time without exception. If there's a contradiction in conception. Because if you follow them even once, then you're willing it be the case, and you can't will it be the case because it creates a contradiction. Now, the contradictions in wills create imperfect duties. And these are about things like being good to other people, like charity. These create imperfect duties that you should follow most of the time, and you can use your own free will, use your own reasoning to decide when and how you do it. So, contradictions in conceptions create duties that you must always follow, and that's different to contradictions in will. These create imperfect duties that you should follow most of the time. Whenever you can, you should help people. Now, these apply to yourself. So, these don't create clear contradictions, but what does happen is, if you will it become the case, it becomes a backwards idea for you. And let's explore what that means. So, in the case of helping others, you might, at some point, be a person who needs help. And so if you will that you should never help people in need, then eventually you might be the person in need when you get old, and you might be in a care home or something, God forbid. When you are in that situation, you are the person who needs help. And so it isn't coherent for you to will that no one should help anyone. Because you can't will something that's impossible for you to will. Because obviously you don't will, no one ever helps you. Because you don't will that no one helps you, you can't will that no one ever helps anyone. And so these don't quite create clear-cut contradictions, but they will create incoherencies that will ultimately impact you. So we have a duty to help others, but this is imperfect, remember. So you don't need to dedicate your life to a charity, and Kant doesn't expect everyone to always help other people. Do it when you can. You could help the homeless people in your city. You could help water aid in a distant country, or help a war-torn country, for example. It's up to you when and how you follow the duty. What's important is that you do when you can. Students often miss specific examples. So the students I tutor will often ask me, Sam, give me examples of the categorical and imperative rules that are formed using this system. And so we have 3 up here. So tell the truth, fulfill your promises, respect private property. Never break your promises, for example. You know. So these are things which are examples of the categorical imperative. The universalization law, that's the first formulation. Now, Kant adds more formulations, and the second one is the final thing you need to understand about Kantian deontology. And this is the humanity formulation. We are rational agents. We have free will. We deserve to be respected. We want to be respected ourselves. And we all possess this thing which is dignity. And this dignity needs to be respected. So, in the same way we do not want to be treated as mere means, we should not treat others as such. They are, as we are, ends in themselves. So what does this mean? Exploiting people is bad. That's what Kant's saying. Lying to people is bad. The reason why it's bad, not only is the concept, if we universalise it, contradictory, not only is that a problem, but when I lie to people, I don't let them use their reasoning. I don't let them use their freedom. I violate their autonomy to make decisions themselves. Now, the maybe not famous example, but if someone says, Sam, do I look fat in this piece of clothing? If I lie to them, then I'm violating their decision-making process. If I just say, maybe you choose a bigger size, I'm letting them make the decision. I'm being honest with them. But if I lie to them, it bypasses that process for them. I treat them as a mere means, and I don't respect their dignity. I don't treat them as ends in themselves. So a maxim which violates the autonomy of an agent fails the humanity formulation. Stealing is the same. If I steal a t-shirt from you, hopefully not when you're wearing it, if I steal it from you, I violate your process of being like, maybe I do give this t-shirt to Sam. If I just steal it, I don't give you the choice. And so I'm not respecting your humanity. I'm not respecting your dignity. They are the 5 working parts that you need to understand for deontology. Thank you for watching.